Hello, hello, and welcome to Parenting Differently, where we leave behind that old way of parenting and allow the gifts of parenthood to raise us. Different to perhaps how we were raised, different to how society keeps on telling us how to raise our children, and maybe you're even parenting differently than you expected, just different. I'm your host, Anja Simmons, and I'm so happy you're here listening or watching my podcast. I'm a trained British nanny, a parenting coach, mum of two big people, and a now author of Parent from This Place, How Yoga Changed the Way I Parented. And I love this being a catalyst for change in the parenting world. And everybody I'm interviewing is really sharing in that dream and having to choose to do it differently and uncovering more and more about themselves. I thought as a trained British nanny, I got this. I've raised other people's children. I know what's going on. And it's different. Each child is different, right? Each situation is different. Each day is different. So I'm really pleased you're here. Today I have a lovely guest. Robbie Seale is her name. And she is an educator and a strong advocate. I'm going to let her tell you about what she's an advocate for. And a mother of quite a few little people. So I'm excited for her to come in and share her wisdom from another point of view, probably parenting quite differently than she thought she would be. And I'm excited to share her with you. So hello and welcome, Robbie. I'm so happy that you're here.
Hello, I'm happy to be here, Anja. Yes, I'm excited.
Good. So we're going to dive right in. Please tell us who you are, who you're mothering, who you are, and who you're mothering.
It's a hard sometimes to keep those two things separate, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a journey in itself of mothering, is who you are and who are you mothering. They do this. But
Yes.
I'm now at the point where they are a little bit this. So
Okay.
that's lovely. Anyway, my name is Robbie Seale and I live in Edmonton, Alberta. That's in Canada. And I am proud to say I am mothering 5 wonderful kids, and they range in age. There's a 16-year age gap. So that's a fun journey in and
Ooh,
of
okay.
itself. That's a little
Yeah.
crazy. But I have a biological daughter, and then I have 4 children that I was blessed to adopt through the foster care system. So, and that was my heart's desire, even when as a young woman, 19 years old. I wasn't married yet. I was dating and soon to be engaged and all that sort of thing. But it was my heart's desire to adopt children from the foster care system, children who needed that stability in their life. Now, at 19,
Beautiful.
did I know what all that meant? No. So we've been on a heck of a ride, but you know what? No regrets. So as I started, I've got 5 wonderful children. My first will be my only biological daughter, soon to be 30 years old. I don't know where the time
I
went,
know,
and
eh?
she's doing splendidly. And my next is 25 years old, and she's a new mom. She has a 2.5-month old. And we've got quite a journey with that daughter who I love desperately. And then some years later, so those 2 girls are 5 years apart.
Okay.
And then some years later, we adopted a set of twins. And this was an open adoption, again, through the foster care system, but an open adoption. And that was challenging as a parenting journey as well, because now you're inviting other people into your life. And, it could be complicated. It could be wonderful.
It's kind of co-parenting, but not really, right?
It wasn't at all co-parenting, because
Right.
my open adoption was not with the birth mother, because she was
Oh,
still in addiction at that time. So all of
okay.
my adopted children, their birth mothers were struggling with substance use disorders, potentially homelessness, alcohol use, drug use, very traumatic situations for the mothers, and of course then for their babies in utero.
Right.
Um, and that has its own lifetime consequences too. These poor babies born to these in these situations where they're prenatally exposed to alcohol, many times have lifelong disabilities, and we'll get
Right.
into that later on.
Sure.
So open adoption with twins. They were 5 months old, little girls,
Ooh.
cutest little things. And so the whole family, of course, was in love with them. The teenagers, who were then, the girls were 13 and I guess 9 when we
Right.
adopted the girls, if I remember my math right.
Yeah.
So they just fell in love with these little babies, and they were this little mommy helpers, which was really lovely. Open adoption was with the maternal grandmother who was caring for the kids, but
Ah.
couldn't maintain caring for the kids
Got it. Okay.
because she was already raising a grandchild. I mean, life is complicated, right?
Gosh,
So
yeah.
my open adoptions with grandma, grandpa, and bio mom's sisters, and also the children's older sister, who was 2 or 3 at the time. So we suddenly had just
Gosh.
broadened our family tree, and they, excuse me, beautifully accepted us into their family tree, including my
What
2
a
other daughters.
blessing.
So it was
Yeah.
a beautiful story. Well, 3 years later, same birth mom of the twins becomes pregnant again, and through the course of events, we chose to adopt that little boy too. So that was our only boy. And so at that point, I have a 16-year-old, an 11-year-old, I imagine, and twins that are nearly 3 years old. And so then there's a baby. So that's a big age group.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to grow in
Yeah.
my journey of parenting. So I started with 30, didn't I? So my one is nearly 30, my next is 25. My twins are soon to be 17 years old, and baby brother is soon to be 14 years old. So you can all pray for me.
I know. Really. I love that. You're like, I'm still in the teen years. It's been a long, long time in the teen years. And
A
now a teen
lot of
boy.
teenagers. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, bless you. My goodness. Thank goodness that there's lovely people like you who,
It was a
your
passion that
parents
was
set
put
that
in my
up.
heart, right? It was a
Yeah.
passion or a calling, or I don't know what you want to call it. I feel it was a calling. It emerged, the calling emerged when I was, like I said, very young, 19 or 20 years old. And I was in downtown Edmonton, which for you who are listening is a relatively small city. There's only now at this point, just over 1 million people. So anyway, I was downtown for an event and I saw young children prostituting, and like 9, 10-year-olds prostituting in the back alleys in downtown Edmonton. And I never knew anything like
No.
that existed. Like you have to remember this was 88. So we're pre-internet, pre-social media, pre-awareness of human trafficking, and I grew up really in a lovely sheltered home. I
Right.
was very naive. And I saw these children, like several children out
Right.
prostituting, and it broke my heart. And
Gosh.
that was what began to change the trajectory of my life.
Right.
Yeah. And it was a couple of years later, then I decided I would build my family through adoption. And then as I got married and moved on, then that's what we did. Yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous. And so, in all of this, Robbie, because you've got the whole spectrum of ages and beauty and complications and all of the whole thing. So,
Yes.
what do you think from your 19-year-old self on? What are you uncovering about yourself as a mother? What were the lessons they kind of gave you?
Oh my goodness. You don't know what you don't know. I grew up like I said, a highly functional home, secure attachment, very structured, and a religious home, but not, not, let's not say in the negative sense.
Yeah.
Beautifully loving parents who are just have celebrated their 54th wedding anniversary. I
Okay.
mean, it was good, but so that's what I knew.
Yeah.
And it was just my sister and I. And so what I didn't know was when I saw these children on the streets and the vulnerability, I didn't know what family systems would have put them there. I didn't know the ravages of addiction and how that plays out, not only in the person who is struggling with an addiction, but also those they love. And those they love are their mothers, their fathers, their siblings, their partner, their children. And addiction plays out. And I also didn't understand the consequences of trauma and how that impacts the brain,
Okay.
and how prenatal alcohol exposure impacts the brain and manifests as a lifelong disability known as fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And so, I had a really big heart and about that much knowledge. And so now I still have a really big heart,
Oh, you
and I
could
have a lot
tell.
more knowledge,
Right.
a lot more knowledge. And I've become, a parent advocate because I'm raising 3 children diagnosed with FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, 4 children prenatally exposed to substance, intergenerational trauma, all these things. So I've had to learn and grow a lot as a parent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was thinking of all the questions I talk about when I'm introducing this about how you parent differently. I would have thought the main one, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I could be way off, would be that you are parenting differently than you expected you would be.
Oh my goodness, that's beautiful. Yes, yes.
Right?
I expected, because I grew up in a loving, secure home, I could parent the same way
Right.
because it worked really well for my sister and I. We turned out,
Yeah.
well, and we have secure attachments and we're, good members of society, so I would have thought that would have gone really well. And what I discovered is it doesn't. It's not enough. It's not enough when you are, and I thought love would be enough because,
Right.
I was naive. And even when I adopted my first child, I'm just scanning back in my mind. I think I was
Yeah.
about 29 or 30 years old.
Okay.
And I had worked as a child youth care worker. I was trained in a child youth care worker. I'd worked with
Okay.
children in group homes, children in lockup situations. I thought love would be enough and attachment would be enough. And I was foolish. It isn't.
It's
It's
not.
key. You have to love unconditionally, but it's not enough. You have to change your way of parenting completely, because my children have a brain-based disability. And so they don't learn from cause and effect. They don't learn from consequences, or they don't learn from conversations that you would try to correct, because most oftentimes, in my case, too, with my children, there's a receptive language challenge, and there's also a slow cognitive processing and slow auditory processing. So the more I talk, in fact, the less they hear. So
Okay.
I've had to learn an entirely different way of parenting. So whereas before it was, attachment, and then inherently you respect your parents, and inherently you want to please them, and then you do as they ask you to do, and you're rewarded with, a sense of competence and a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. That doesn't work with children who have been prenatally exposed to alcohol, not because there's any character flaw, but because their brain works so much differently. So I have to now parent with a brain-based focus.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. That really is. I had never thought of it in this way. That's really eye-opening. And when you talk of attachment, I mean, sorry, I'm a little blown with this because it's so
That's
fantastic that you're sharing this, because how important attachment is. Now, I would imagine the journey, because you've got them as babies, it would even be, it would be even harder, because you would assume as the babies would then feel your love and go from there. It's not like you have taken on a 10-year-old or 12-year-old where I could see it more. So that is fascinating. But it's the brain. The brain has been
Brain.
misshapen.
Yes. Well, there is
the wrong thing.
So the brain, because alcohol is a teratogen, which means it causes birth defects. Right. Like if you think of a person, anybody who's, even had a glass of wine, and it becomes, you start to feel the washover, and it changes your brain chemistry.
Right.
So that's only one glass of wine. And of course, many women are unaware when they're pregnant. My only pregnancy was a surprise. I was married, but it was a completely unplanned pregnancy. But many, many women have an unplanned pregnancy. And it does not just young women. I know women, in their late 40s that have had an unplanned pregnancy.
Right.
Surprise.
Menopause. You thought it was menopause. Oops.
It's a baby. But if it's your normal practice, to have a glass of wine at dinner, or, you're celebrating, or it's Christmas, you don't have to be an alcoholic. Just these little bits of wine can really impact this little, baby in utero. Think of when you have a glass of wine. We have glasses of wine because it relaxes us, right? It changes our brain chemistry. It changes how our body feels. Well, the same applies to the baby in utero. And so if it's only a matter of cells, if it's, early days, later on, no matter when alcohol comes into the baby, because it's, like I said, a teratogen, it passes right through the placental barrier into the uterus, into the baby's bloodstream. And so it has an impact. And of course, baby doesn't have a fully developed liver, isn't able to process the alcohol. So there is damage that comes, and it's brain and body damage. But the brain damage is structural and is chemical. So then if you think of a person who's had a traumatic brain injury or a stroke, for example, we often see changes in behavior. We often see a deficit in that higher level thinking and the ability to impede or to inhibit their own kind of emotions. And so those things are very typical of individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Now, in terms of attachment, My first adopted child came to us as a 3-year-old who'd already
Oh,
been in
okay.
the foster care system that entire time.
Right.
So there are disrupted attachments over and over and over again,
Yeah.
which causes, lifelong brain effects as well, and deep down in the soul, and prenatally exposed to drug and alcohol and trauma. So she came to us as a 3-year-old and we adopted her at 5. Well, this lovely, and I mean, I attached to her, she attached to me. We built a wonderful relationship. I homeschooled her, which I didn't think I would ever do, part of the journey
Oh,
of mothering.
interesting.
That's what
Right.
she needed. So I homeschooled
Right.
her to reinforce that attachment, her sense of belonging, build up her competency. But that darling child at 14 began to experiment with alcohol, unfortunately, as so many, Canadian teens do. Maybe
Right.
not at 14, but many Canadian teens do. Only alcohol swept her away. She was instantly attracted and loved that sensation, and became addicted to alcohol, and she was experimenting with other substances. And so despite all efforts I put into therapy and
Mm-hmm.
interventions and I moved from one community to another in order to change her schools and change her peers. I mean, I moved my house,
Right.
my household, and even so, in in less than a year, in much less than a year, she was um, evicted from a residential treatment center, put into a safe housing because I couldn't bring her home. She wasn't safe for
Mm-hmm.
my other children to bring home. And then she was homeless. Just after her
Right.
15th birthday, she was homeless, and she remained homeless on the streets using drugs and alcohol for the next 7 years. So I certainly didn't expect that in my journey. That was not the dream of adoption.
No, no.
That
And
wasn't the
how did
dream of
you,
parenting.
right? So let's go there. How
Yeah.
did you, as your mama heart, um, yeah, where were you in all that? Well, like where do you find your this idea? Because I strongly believe that, and it's easy to say because I'm obviously from a different perspective. I have not raised children that with those conditions.
Yeah.
Um, but I still really feel that we all come with our own journey,
Yeah.
right? We all come with the, our life lessons and how it goes. And, but so if you have even some of that in there, you're still day to day, must be in fear, must be in stress, must be in like, how do I
Devastated.
help somebody? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because your mother's heart is, I'm going to move heaven and earth and
Yes.
mountains to save my child. I can see the devastation coming toward
Right.
her, though she can't see it because she's
No.
14, of course,
Sure.
and nothing's going to hurt a 14-year-old.
No,
They
I've
don't
got
need a
this.
mother.
Yeah, my
Yeah,
I
I've
know.
got this. Mom, you don't know what you're talking about. So you're
Yeah.
facing that, kind of typical, plus this pull of this alcohol and the the chaos and the freedom and the everything that it brought with it. And then too,
Right.
that meant that she was hanging out. What that also was true of her situation is the people who were supplying her with alcohol were older,
Mm.
and they were significantly older. And so then she was sneaking out of the house when this first started happening. Of course, I don't know that. I'm sleeping, and
Yeah.
I've got, keep bear in mind, this is not my only child. This is not my only focus.
Yeah.
I've got 5 children. And
Mm.
at this time in my life, I'm single parenting as well and moving
Right.
through a divorce. And so there was a lot of grief
Yeah.
already going on, and finding my new sea legs in this new environment. Um, and found out very quickly that my daughter, months later, my daughter was into addiction and running away with, or running out and sneaking out with older people. So she was highly vulnerable. So it was just mama bear that took over.
Right.
I was just filled with determination that this will not happen to my child, my precious child. This will
Yeah.
not happen. And I threw everything at her. And I really had to rely on even my parents to help with my younger 3. So I had a lot of energy to give to my daughter, driving her to
Mm.
treatment, attending family therapy, all that kind of thing. But really, it was the most heartbreaking thing I've
Gosh.
ever
Yeah.
been through. The most heartbreaking thing, and then to find drugs in my house too, to know she's using alcohol, but then to find drugs in my house that could put my other children at risk. Now, all of a sudden, you've got this dilemma that you've never thought you would have to face.
Right.
Which child do I choose to protect?
Oof. Oof.
They're
That's
all
a.
vulnerable. Which child?
Oh my gosh, Robbie, I feel that.
So,
Yeah.
that was really hard. And so what that meant was, did have to make that choice. And what that did mean is I was able, thank God, I was able to enroll my daughter ultimately in a residential treatment program. So then she was, I hoped, safe and was receiving the treatment she needed and understand and getting a chance to clean her system and clear her mind. But at 14, how much are you really able to dig down into the trauma? You know, how, like, developmentally, even as a neurotypical
Yeah,
14-year-old,
yeah.
how able are you? You're not really able. Your brain is not mature yet. I mean, your brain isn't even mature till you're 25. So
Right.
how much can you dig down? So she was in the residential treatment center. Other really devastating self-harming behaviors began, and she was home on weekends. And it became clear that her behaviors were putting my other children in extreme vulnerability.
Right.
So I already had to make the devastating decision to go, no, you need to go to treatment. I mean, it's devastating because you're saying I can't handle this and I need to put my child in the care of others. I don't do that easily.
No,
You know,
no.
I protect my children.
Yeah.
And then when she was evicted from the treatment center, nearly graduated, this close, but she was evicted for bringing drugs and stuff into there, and they wanted me to bring her home. And fortunately, I don't know, things happened, things aligned, and I had made that decision in my heart. My heart was broken, and I was grieving, and just so stressed. And that day, I made a decision that I can't do more. I've done what I can, and I can't do more. And I have to protect my other children. And so I had peace when I made that decision. Now, I wasn't releasing my daughter. She's still my daughter, but I had peace. Thank God I'd made that decision, because that night the treatment center called me to say, you have to come get her because we have to evict her. And I already had that peace in that decision. So I could say, I can't, I won't. And that began a whole nother ball rolling. But that was such a devastating decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to find the peace, that inner intuition, that inner knowing in amongst the real chaos, like not little just life chaos, which we all have, but like real chaos was
that knowing, that inner knowing, that that voice, that God speaking, whatever you want to call it. It was, once I made, like I knew I was being pulled, and once I made that decision, it was a peace that washed over me. So I knew I was on the right path. Now, as you said, chaos. Can I say that simultaneously?
Oh no, let me hold on. Okay.
You better hold on. Simultaneously, like I said, I had moved my family. So in the September of, let me dial it back now, September of 2010, I had moved late September, I'd moved my family from a satellite community called Beaumont, Alberta, to Edmonton, Alberta, and taken my children. I have four children at home. I have one overseas at this point. I've taken my 3 children out of the schools that they're in, plunked them in a different school in Edmonton. And I rented out my house in Beaumont and rented a new house. So that's fun, right? That's in September. Single parent, can we go there again? And by November, I get a call, or I get a conversation, I guess a call from the grade 1 teacher to say, your twins are failing school. Now, they had no trouble in preschool, no trouble in their French immersion kindergarten, and now there's trouble in grade 1. And so I said, okay, well, thinking they had been in French immersion kindergarten, now they're failing school. I said to the teacher, can we just put them back in kindergarten? Clearly, they've missed some foundational steps. This is only November. I think it would be brilliant. Can we put them back? No, we don't do that. Well, what do you do? Well, Mom, you need to provide more support at home, and you need to provide some tutoring. Simultaneously, what's going on with my other daughter? I began to weep to this teacher and say, I know what you're asking of me. I have raised 2 other children. I have homeschooled my other daughter. I know what you're asking me, but I have nothing to give. I cannot do that.
Right.
Sorry, we can't do anything for you.
Oh,
when
you're really reaching out for help and support. Yeah. Oh, that's horrible.
And I say simultaneously, my 3-year-old boy, who has been medically fragile from the time of his birth till this present day, he's been medically fragile. I mean, we have a frequent flyer card to the emergency because of respiratory distress. We have a plethora of specialists that we see. So we're at the Stollery Hospital, every 3 weeks or so. If it's not by appointment, it's by emergency.
Right.
Simultaneously. And now my 3-year-old boy is not now, but is presenting extremely hyperactive. And at this point, I'm a fairly specialized parent. I've got a lot of skills and I'm grasping at straws with this one. So I take him to the pediatrician and say, I need help. I need resources.
Right.
And she watches as he climbs on the examining table that's like twice his height, on and off and over me, because I must be monkey bars, over me and under me and through me and under my chair and back up on the table. And she's watching. And I'm not really shocked because he does this all the time.
Yeah, you're like,
and
oh,
he's
this is
capable.
Normal. Right.
And I always joke he's made of rubber because yeah, he will fall, but he's never hurt. I'm always close at hand. Simultaneously, she says, your son has ADHD and I'm going to give you a prescription. That's not what I went there for. And that began the road, exactly this precipice of my daughter's in treatment. Well, my daughter's in addiction. I'm running away at this time. She's running away and I'm getting treatment. I'm chasing all this. My girls are failing school. My son is ADHD. It's crazy, crazy. And then just in a few months later, my daughter is evicted from the treatment center. And so now I have to do the deep dive into how do I serve my children the best. I had really great parenting skills and I was a trained parent as being a child youth care worker.
Right.
I had really good, solid skills, but they weren't serving my kids. And so I had to ask for help. I enrolled in a program with coaching families through Catholic Social Services. So coaching families, they train parents, they teach parents who are raising children with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Oh boy, that's a big word. And that was a big journey. And with their help, I did the deep dive into learning everything I could about FASD. And, I've come through it and my kids are doing well. FASD is a lifelong disability. That's not going to change. They're doing well because of what I've learned and the accommodations I've put into place and how I've changed my parenting. So they're doing really well. And now I share what I know with other parents because I know how hard it is.
Well, you've had the whole spectrum, right?
Of
everything. You tell me what you've dealt with and I'll tell you what a good way. So actually, this just brought back to me that first question. So for you, Robbie, what are you uncovering about you?
Oh, an inner strength.
This is what I'm thinking.
Was there? Yes.
That's what I feel from you. But yeah, it's your question.
An inner strength that I didn't know was there. A capacity to learn and learn and learn that I didn't know was there. And a capacity for deep empathy. And strength, ability to learn, ability then to communicate. Did you know I failed my public speaking course in college?
No, funny enough, it doesn't appear that way.
Happen? I wasn't ready then, but with what my kids have taught me, I have new skills, new abilities, and a deep, deep passion. Not only to serve my children really well, but also to help other families who are raising children with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder or other neurobehavioral challenges.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's tricky to ask this question because it feels like everything you've said would be the hardest. But I'm thinking for you as a mum, what has been the hardest part of parenting if you could group all 5?
Oh, yeah. The hardest part of parenting is looking beyond the presenting behaviors. Because my children's presenting behaviors are so challenging and they look like naughty, defiant, rude, angry. I'm going to punish this kid or I'm going to, and I don't mean this.
No, that was your passion speaking. Yes, I get it. Yes.
I mean, I'm going to ground you for the rest of your life kind of thing.
Right.
But to look beyond the presenting behaviors, to understand that's rooted in the brain and it's rooted in the misstructure, the structure and the impact of trauma, the impact of prenatal alcohol exposure, the impact of disrupted attachments. All my kids were taken away from their birth mothers, and birth mothers who were not capable, but that doesn't mean birth mothers don't love.
Right. Right.
and that inherent bond was broken. And so to look beyond the challenging, daily, confounding behaviors to say it's brain, not behavior. How do I accommodate this injured brain to reduce these behaviors and to improve my kids' outcomes? And when I can reduce behavior, improve outcomes, then I improve attachment.
Got it.
It's completely backwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when your kid is yelling at you and telling you that you're ruining their life because you won't make one more grilled cheese sandwich, saying, everything every mistake that he or she or they make is inherently my fault. Well, that just goes with momhood. But, but I can't approach it the way I would with my firstborn.
Right.
I have to approach it entirely different to say, what's the lagging skill? What's missing? How do I support? Do I just shut up and not respond at all? Sometimes when they launch a grenade of aggravation at me, I just and I don't respond, which looks like I'm a really passive parent and I'm allowing abhorrent behavior. I'm not. I'm choosing to not respond. I don't accept every invitation to an argument. There are many. And I choose to not respond to that most of the time and look at what's the presenting behavior and offer help. I see this is hard for you. What do you need?
Yeah.
Or I set a limit.
This idea that so you are parenting them where they are at. That just came to me.
Absolutely.
Talk about it in other formats, but you really have had no choice but to parent them where they're at.
Yeah.
For success.
Well, I have a choice for success. I have a choice because if I choose to parent them where I think they ought to be, I will bring about secondary disabilities such as anger, rage, aggression, withdrawal, disrupted family, disrupted school failure, family failure, smoking, drinking. Those are secondary disabilities, running away. So we've been on the edges. And with my second child, the one I was telling you about who went into addiction, I didn't know about all this.
Right.
I knew about FASD, but I only knew a little bit that they have people with FASD have spotty memories. That's all I knew from my training. Well, that didn't fit this child.
Right.
She was academically, did well, gifted in music, wonderful with animals, empathetic, had a lot of strength. So the little bit I did know, she didn't fit the profile. So I missed a lot in terms of, and I didn't understand disrupted attachments. I didn't understand trauma. So there was, I parented her the very best I could with my whole heart, but I missed some things. And also, and I don't bear full responsibility for the choices she made, or the way her life went. I did for years. I did for about 10 years. So, I lived in grief and taking responsibility. But then when I realized that her 3 brothers, who also were in foster care and in adoption, went the same path.
Okay.
Then I realized, this is her journey. And it's very much her birth mother's journey. And all 3 boys raised in different, 3 other boys raised in different homes, well, 2 of them together, but, different family settings, all went the path of addiction. All went the path of, not all, but 3 went the path of, dealing drugs, including my daughter, and gang life. They all went that path, which is birth mother's path and birth mother's legacy. So you have to think about, I had to really learn and think about nurture versus nature.
Right.
My daughter is grafted into both trees.
Yeah.
I remember my story when I said when I started, I thought love would erase everything. I kind of naively had this picture of, those big pink erasers that we used to have in school.
Right. Yeah. Big funny smell. Yes.
The really big ones. I kind of had this idea in my mind that love would be like that big pink eraser. And I would just erase all the bad stuff that ever happened. I would take my 3-year-old in my arms. I would love her and nurture her and give her my every fiber of my being, and she would be well. So I did that, and she hurt, and she stumbled, and she fell, and she fell into addiction. That broke my heart, and there was a lot of learning to come from that. And I think it's a beautiful, and it's a cautious thing to say, but I think it's a beautiful thing to say that your adopted child, and it doesn't matter if they have these struggles or not, your adopted child is grafted into both trees. because they have a genetic legacy.
Mm-hmm.
That blood, indigenous people call it a blood knowing.
Right.
They have that, that they have family traits, family characteristics, as we all do. But our
Right.
kids
Right.
don't know all of that. But we have to
Mm.
see that in our kids, but they're also grafted into our nurture tree. So there was a
Right.
lot
Yeah.
to learn. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
I don't
Robbie,
know if I
thank you
answered your
so
question.
much. Hey, no, I love it. There's so much, wisdom that you're sharing for all mothers. And then for those who are specifically, I mean, they can find out more about you. We'll have all of this, your information and everything if that's the path they're on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, if I may,
Yeah.
I do teach, I do teach FASD training to families who are raising children, might be grandparents or biological mothers or
Okay.
families or adoptive families, foster families. I do teach FASD training here in Edmonton through CASA. And also, I recently launched a podcast called FASD Family Life. And so, to share of my experiences, my knowledge, and I bring in guests as well, just to convey the message to all parents that I know the struggle is real, but so is success.
Yeah, that's a beautiful giving hope things are not feeling hopeful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there
Yeah.
is hope. Children with developmental disabilities, children with neurodevelopmental challenges have a lot of strengths too. And we have to provide the accommodations for the brain injury, just as we would for if our child was blind, or for in my case, I need glasses to be able to read. I took them off because they're so glaring, but I need glasses to be able to read. So without this accommodation, I can't read. And so if
Right.
you yell at me, try harder, you're just not trying. Well, you know what? I'm kind of spunky. You're going to get some behaviors from me. They're going to
Right.
start not too bad, but they're going to elevate if you keep pushing me. Same with our kids with a brain injury. And so
Mm-hmm.
the accommodations we provide are no different than providing me glasses, a child a wheelchair and a ramp if that's what required. Our children need brain-based accommodations to meet them where they're at, to help them transition over to the next level of learning, development, capacity, and just right where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Robbie. Greatly appreciate that.
My
And
absolute pleasure.
oh, wonderful. And for all the viewers and people listening, please subscribe and please share. This is super information. Another way of parenting differently. This is a new one for Parenting Differently podcast. And all of Robbie's information will be below. You can reach out and find her and listen to her podcast too. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. Bye-bye.